So I think people meaning organizations, are woefully unprepared for when they say they want to be customer centric. They really need to understand what that means.
You're listening to the Delighted Customers Podcast, empowering you to achieve sustainable growth by delighting your customers consistently. I'm your host, Mark Slayton, and this episode, I think you're going to love it. A conversation with a longtime friend and mentor, Diane Majors, CX thought leader, adjunct professor, speaker, CX leader, and former psychologist. Yes, that's right, psychologist. We discussed a number of interesting topics, including design thinking and why it's such a powerful tool in the journey to delight customers. Diane also reveals a story about a conversation that changed the trajectory of her career. I just know you're going to love this conversation, so let's jump in. I am so excited. Now I have to give some full disclosure here. Diane and I worked together at my last role as the head of client experience at Sandy Spring Bank. Diane helped me for over 5 years with strategy, with planning, with development, with executing our CX strategy, and made a huge difference for us. And that's why I'm so honored and privileged to have her on the show. Diane, welcome.
Thank you, Mark. It is such a pleasure to be here. I'm super excited for all the things that you are doing and bringing your wealth of knowledge to this profession as well. So thank you.
All right. So let me ask you about your journey. I shared in the bio that you did everything from an MS and you were a psychologist, a clinical psychologist. You worked in AT&T. You ended up at Cisco. You do teaching at SMU. We didn't even mention that. You were the CEO of the Customer Experience Professionals Association. You did all these different things, but what drew you into the CX profession to begin with?
It's totally accidental and serendipitous. and the reason I say that is because I took a break from clinical psychology because my specialty was death and dying. People probably are going to see that doesn't really fit my personality if they know me, but it became a passion for me. But it's also a very difficult and heavy topic to work with hospice volunteers and people who are at their end of life. And so I was taking a break, and a friend of mine was starting a company in the basement of his house, and he asked me to come in and work with him for a while and kind of help out. And I just got the bug. And when I say that, what I mean is, to me, it was all about, yes, I was impacting people's lives in psychology, but what I realized in business and in working within a company, that you're impacting a lot of lives. And you're able to help people with things they're struggling with or things that they need and their wants and needs and expectations. So that CEO and then the next CEO that I went to, as I started to kind of figure out, this was back then, it wasn't a thing, right? We were doing surveys by mail at that point. But the next CEO that I worked for is really the one who kind of set me on this path, because he believed for the company to grow, that everything we did needed to be based off what customer needs were and how we needed to serve them efficiently, effectively. And so he set me on a track of, go figure out what they need and come back and build things for them and go do it again and keep that perpetual motion going. Well, we didn't know that's what customer experience really was. And so I came by that just organically. It wasn't, hey, I'm searching it out to go find it. It kind of found me. So when I moved to Cisco corporate, we went through an enterprise transformation project, and that was really the kind of stepping stone to it was becoming a profession. It was about 2010, I guess. Mm-hmm. And there was just a few of us who were practicing. There was a gal from Coke, and there was Lorraine Shoemaker from, she was with Verizon at the time. And part of that was just trying to find people who knew this profession. And so then the trajectory from there is, kind of going out on my own for a while. And then AT&T found me and asked me to come and work in their business solution piece. So it all just kind of fell into place after that. So it wasn't purpose. It was totally by accident.
And a good accident.
Yes. I can't imagine doing anything else.
And that's really, what we hear from a lot of CX professionals is, They came here through all different paths, but they can't imagine doing anything else.
Yeah, it is a very common statement that people make. Like, I was born to do this. I hear that a lot. And I think that talks to the profile of the people that do this work, that they're connectors. They're able to see the big picture, but they can drill down into those micro chasms, working to clean data, but yet they're thinking about this whole customer strategy. So there definitely is a profile that way, and that the ability to think about what we do and then going back to a job like just doing sales and marketing would be torture for me. Mm-hmm. Like, you don't have that purview to be able to look across the organization and really make some dramatic changes in some instances.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, in the process of making those changes, the goal is to differentiate your brand, right, from your competitors and provide something different. Why do you believe that CX actually can be a brand differentiator?
Products and services can be copied so quickly in this day and age. You have an idea, you put something in the market, and very quickly your competitors are right behind you. Tech allows us to do that. A lot of companies we didn't have all this entrepreneurial spirit really until recently, where platforms and tech allowed a lot of companies to do things at scale that they weren't able to do as entrepreneurial companies before. So we're finding that even the large companies are really struggling trying to compete against the startups and the innovators, because they can move more rapidly. So there's absolutely a differentiation when you think about the only thing that's really left as a differentiation is the experience, because products and tech and all that, it just perpetuates itself. And it's always this game of, one-upsmanship, and experience, I think, can make a difference.
So Diane, now we're going to ask you some questions about back when you were a practitioner in some of these places. As people listening today, there may be some practitioners or people who are business leaders who are wanting to drive an exceptional or outstanding customer experience in their organization. So might be interested in the perspective of what it's like and to walk in the shoes of a practitioner. So as you consider your career as a CX practitioner, what is your greatest success story?
It was at AT&T, and I worked in the business side, so it was very complex. We had like 635 products. It was a lot going on. One of the things that we wanted to do is really enable the organization with new skills and new knowledge and kind of new ways of working. One of the things that we did is we started to create labs. What that means is we created places for the product teams and really anybody who wanted to participate to come and learn about design, to learn about experience, and really do some hands-on exercises that had nothing to do with AT&T. One of the reasons that was a success was because we were trying to teach the skill rather than trying to apply the skill while people were thinking about the organization and the business, right? So it was kind of this learn, try, apply approach of talking about why things were important and how it was going to feed the organization and their growth and the company's growth, to kind of apply it. Let's try this on something like going and renting a car, like just teaching the concept of how to approach and design and experience and understand and build empathy. And then applying that then became so much easier, because when they'd say, wow, I could really use this technique to work on this product. We're having this problem, and this could be a great tool for me to use there. It's like, great. So we ended up kind of building a toolkit more than anything, but that also included the competency and the knowledge. So we created more of a draw. Rather than trying to push this on people, it was come learn, come find ways of doing things differently that you can address. So those labs became the way that we really began to engage the organization. And we recognized about 6 months in that we, be careful what you ask for, because we had so many people coming to the labs that we actually had to stand up another team to kind of train the trainer, which was great because it became very organic for the organization and a huge draw for people wanting to learn a new skill set that they didn't have before. And so that's probably one of the bigger success stories from my time in a business.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So if I were an employee there, what would the registration process look like? Would I have to raise my hand, or was I called upon?
We sought out a couple of teams that we knew were, we call them early adopters. We had one very progressive product manager, and he was all about this. He was so excited to talk to us. And so we went to his team. They invited us to come, and he brought his whole team together, and we went through a whole couple of day workshop, just teaching the concepts. We didn't work on any project. We just taught the concepts. But everybody else who wanted to, when they heard about it, would come to us and just register. So we had standing days that the labs were going to be open. People could come drop in for lunch. We had lunch and learns. We had experience hacks. You got a problem. You think it's a small problem? Come on in. We'll tackle it. We'll pick a tool and we'll figure out how we can help you tackle that opportunity that you have. So it really became more of a service within the organization to learn. But eventually, as I said, it turned in more into just this way of working. We started to build playbooks, and we trained other people to do that and take each other through it. So
what I'm hearing, and you tell me if I'm wrong, what I'm hearing is you're sort of building champions, ambassadors, if you will, for people who in more of a distributed model, where other people can carry the message. Other people have skills in their toolkit to help make change. Everything doesn't have to be so telegraphed.
No, not at all. It was very organic, and we called the program. So that was the lab, but the program wrapped around that was called CXL. The way we promoted that was we're trying to help you excel in what you do and how you perform and skills that you can take along with you in your career. And that was a combination of, there was also online learning, there was hands-on lunch and learns they could come to. So we were educating, we were enabling with the tools, and then the true engagement came with things like the ambassadors, where we had a true experienced leaders network, people who were just passionate about this and wanted to learn. So they became our train the trainers, but they were also helping us to really keep our ear to the organization to say, well, what's next? What's the lead? So they were pivotal in helping us to really figure out what we should do going forward and have a plan. That's one of my lessons learned as a practitioner. I'll share in a little bit.
Yeah.
having a plan and working the plan. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like what you're also describing is because they were sort of advocates for the effort, you created a closed feedback loop from you to them, from the field, so to speak, back to you to help to know what's a priority, what you should be working on next.
Yeah. Yeah. And which of the tools are most impactful. Like some were great to use, but it was feedback like this really worked well for us. And then sharing those stories. So we'd go and interview those teams, and they'd talk about how it made a difference to the product getting adopted or, other benefits. So we used those success stories to share with the rest of the organization that this isn't just a soft and fuzzy thing. This actually helped get this product out the door quicker, fewer problems down, when they launched, better adoption. The partners were involved, so they were selling it more. So it had all these benefits that we made sure we highlighted to everyone.
Nice. Well, nice. Well, now let me flip that over and say, as all practitioners, we learn from experience, we learn from challenges. What were some of the potholes and landmines, some of the things that you struggle with, maybe more than you thought?
I wish I would have learned more about change leadership early on. You'd think as a psychologist, I would have that kind of figured out. No, right. It's human behavior when you're at work or individually or even as a group. I didn't learn enough about how to lead change. So change management is a great technique, and it's got tools and processes which work, but being able to lead that change is really hard. Especially at this lesson learned at Cisco Foods, by the way, not the other Cisco, was, it's a very supply chain oriented business. So very logistics, tactical. And so going in and talking about emotion and trying to talk about the importance of the experience took a lot of time. And so one of the things that was a pothole for me was learning what people were after, what was important to them from their standpoint, and then being able to talk and translate that language. So being a bit of a chameleon in dealing with people and helping them understand the why that mattered to them, and then helping them understand what to do to move forward that was going to benefit them the most. So that was a skill that I hadn't had. And anybody who knows me knows I'm a little headstrong. So you can imagine me going in and kind of running up the hill with the flag and nobody's following you. You're like, okay, I got to find a different way to do this. So that was a big lesson learned.
Yeah. I heard someone say, if you're leading and nobody's following, you're just out taking a walk.
Yes, that is exactly right. Making sure you turn around and are people there. And I think that's I want to share with the audience, there's a moment in time where you should recognize and celebrate it, where you're pushing the rock up the hill. Like, it seems like, every conversation you have, you're turning on light bulbs, and it seems like things are never going to turn around. And I recall several times in my career where I felt that shift in, whether it was somebody in a meeting asking, well, what would the customer think besides me? Or that draw of people coming to us to learn more. We didn't have to push the idea of these labs, for example. Those moments where it starts to shift need to be celebrated. So one of the potholes I just kept moving things forward. I didn't stop and really think about the change and think about where we were headed. And so I'll talk about that in just a little bit, of that future.
Yeah, that's such a great point. Is we're pushing that rock up the mountain and every day. And when you have a moment like that where somebody asks a question, inside you're just jumping this little joy dance. It's important to take a moment and celebrate that. Yes,
you have to, and being able to link that to what you've done. I think sometimes we don't take enough credit. Most CX practitioners are very humble, and they like to be in the background. They're not usually that, out in the middle. They're in the background, kind of supporting people and being their angel on the shoulder and doing those pieces. So I think we need to celebrate those internally and share with the organization, but with ourselves, that it's hard work. You tell people what this job really is, and they go, "Oh, no way could I do that."
Well, we hope we're being a source of comfort to those out there who are struggling. We so appreciate the work you're doing. And you said it earlier about, you're switching careers, making a difference in people's lives. I mean, as someone who is very directly on the front lines of helping people deal with death and dying, and then switching to this and even, putting that kind of language around it, and I believe it 100% is that, how many times even a day do people interact with companies, organizations, whatever, where their day could be influenced, the trajectory of their day could be influenced one way or another. And we have the opportunity to really affect so many lives.
Yes, I agree. We were just celebrating a kind of a friend to the CX community, Chris Rios, yesterday in a podcast. And one of the things that we talked about was just his impact in two people who were in a search for their careers and the impact that he had on people's lives. And I think sometimes when we think about, yes, we have to deal with all those tactical things like how we answer the phone and putting in, digital support and chat and AI and how intelligent it is. It's really a bigger picture. Like, I don't know how many of you, like, you're having a great day and then you have one bad experience with the company and your entire mood shifts, which, has the butterfly effect to everybody around you. So sometimes I don't think we see the importance of what we do in people's lives, truly making a difference there.
You're listening to the Delighted Customers Podcast. I'm Mark Slayton, your host, and today we're with Diane Majors of Experience Catalyst. If you're just starting out on your CX journey or want to take it to the next level, or maybe you're struggling with executive support or the return on investment of CX, let's put our heads together and jointly define the problem that needs solving. I'd love to see if there's a way I can help. You can reach me at empoweredcx.com. Now, back to the show. Diane, now let's move into some practical tips, some ideas that maybe that our practitioners and other people listening can use to help move the needle. So from the standpoint of design, I know you have a lot of experience around design thinking and human-centered design. For some of the audience who isn't quite as familiar, could you explain what is design in the CX space and why is it important?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I think if you think about the way organizations typically work, is they will, and this happens even when you have sometimes a CX practice, is the organization will find a problem and they assume and intuitively think they know, well, this is the problem. This is what customers are saying. This is that problem. We'll just go fix it, right? So they're in this find and fix mode. Organizations that slow down and really begin to find the right problem to solve. That's and they sit with the what the human is trying to do and what they're trying to accomplish and what they want that experience to be like, and truly discovering what they want and need, and even unmet needs. That's what design is. Design is a human-centered way to stop and think about, well, if customers are tell us they want this or they're struggling with this, then do we really understand their world and what they want and what they might anticipate, and how can we innovate around that? And using design tools and techniques and a process to think about, let's really find that right problem to solve. Let's be intentional and purposeful about how we want the experience to be. Let's try it out. Let's be iterative and agile in thinking through trying several things as we go, and then landing on something and actually thinking about how do we design across channels, across different touch points. All of those things come into play that really come in between finding an opportunity and going and doing something about it. And so that human-centered approach, human-centered design, really is where we find that we can connect more, that we get better results from it, that we're really understanding not only the customer, but what experience we want to create, because we're really thinking about the future and planning what's going to happen, rather than it kind of, let's fix it and then, oh, we kind of fixed it, maybe we did or we didn't. So it's intentional and purposeful and human are kind of the three words that I use when I think about design.
And I think about the human part of it. I immediately go to personas in starting out. Explain to those people who may not be as familiar the use of a persona when it comes to design thinking and how it can apply.
Yeah, I think it's a great way. We think a lot of times about segments. So segments and personas are different. Segments are kind of groups of people, and they're typically demographically. So a segment of people might be, say, myself as a little bit older mom who's got parents and kids all at the same time, right? That my age group living in my area, for example, and my 21-year-old daughter, right? We're different segments because our demographics are different. Personas are really the way to bring that person to life. So an example of that would be my interests and my daughter's are very similar. My other daughter, our interests are not similar. The way that I want to interact with a company is different than the way my 21-year-old wants to act. So those differences in the psychographics, we call it, our interests, our attitudes, our perceptions, are why personas are important. Because if you treat everybody as a segment, you're missing part of that story. So personas are a way to bring the difference between me buying a product from you and my 21-year-old daughter buying a product. It's thinking about, who we are, but it's also what we want and how we prefer to interact with that company or brand. And so the personas are how we really bring those to life and say, Elena is my daughter's name. Elena and people like her, these are the things they want. This is how they want to interact with you. These are the things that are important to them. These are the channels they use. This is how much time they spend on the phone. Those things are important when you're thinking about designing an experience versus designing it for me, which those things are completely different in most instances.
Yeah.
So that's how personas come to life.
Thank you for shedding light. I love the contrast between, a persona and just a segment, right? A market segment. I know, because we've worked together, that literally you have an image or a photograph of, it could be someone you don't know, right? Probably a stock photo of but it is a photo of a human being. And then you put all the information you just shared about their demographic information, psychographic, their feelings, their thoughts. So you really force the people thinking through how to best serve like you use the word humanizing it, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And that's what design does. It continually comes back to, hey, as we think about, doing mock-ups or wireframes, let's say we're building a new app, we would take those wireframes and really think about, okay, we've created this. Is that really going to meet their needs? Well, they're not going to want to scroll, or they're not going to want to go into a chat bot on their phone, but they certainly will text. Okay, that tells me that persona wants to do that. So we continually bring that. How would the person react to it? What would they say or do? Gene Bliss always says, and Colin Shaw says this as well, like, would you do that to your mother? So it always keeps that whole thinking about how the human's going to interact with what you're designing. That really makes design stand out. And we talk about that. Would you do that to your mother? Because it makes you think about, well, if I was designing something and my mom was going to use it, would she be able to do what she wanted to do? And not from a demographic standpoint, but more from a just usability and watching. If you've ever watched your parents struggle with technology, it's a prime example. We're not designing things for them, and we need to understand how to do that for all different kinds of personas.
Excellent. And I know under the curtain, behind the curtain, there are a lot of different techniques associated with design thinking that you can apply. But I think the important thing to note is you're starting with the human instead of starting with maybe the technology, for example, not to pick on our IT folks, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's why I think a lot of digital transformations have struggled because, going digital is supposed to be using technology to create better value. And I think what we've seen with digital transformations that have not been successful is they didn't start with the experience. They started with, we're going to automate something or turn this form into a, manual form into a digital form, not really thinking through the why and how that would be perceived, and would everybody want to do it that way? And so thinking about creating experiences and designing them and then enabling with technology is where we see digital transformations really be successful.
Yeah. So bringing more value instead of what I call pedaling faster in the wrong direction.
Yes. That would be a great analogy.
Okay. All right. So now we're gonna swing back a little bit to the personal side, if you don't mind. And
sure.
I'm going to ask all my guests here, when they think about their own career, their own life, and the span of it, the range of it, there's so much to learn already from what you've shared. But was there a turning point in your life that changed the trajectory of how you approach your career? What was it, and what was the outcome of it?
Yes. I'll share a story about a large project I was working on in one company, and we had a leader for that big project, and it was a lot. It was a lot of work, a lot of 2 a.m. calls, 60-hour work weeks, and I was responsible to help with all the things that touched the customer, which was pretty much everything eventually. But one of the pieces of feedback as we were wrapping up the project and we were doing our retrospections and what went well and what didn't, is he gave me feedback that really changed that trajectory that you talked about. He said to me, I love how you get work done. I love how you build the team and how you move people forward, but you don't stay in your lane. Everything becomes bigger and more. And so that kind of distracted the project a little bit from moving forward. And, at first I was kind of taken aback, that was wrong, that I was trying to really make things connect, as is my nature. And it took me a couple hours to drive home. Actually, I had an hour and a half drive home that night. By the time I got home, I was like, you know what? That tells me I'm in the wrong place, because that's not the purpose of, what we do. He didn't seem to understand that the ability to connect people and things and think about that entire journey and think about how all the pieces and parts we were building fit together and making sure they fit together right into a puzzle piece was really a strength of mine. And I realized I was in the wrong place, that I needed to be in a place where somebody would value my ability to connect the dots And I gave notice and quit 2 weeks later.
Wow.
It had such a profound impact on, I was not in the right place.
Wow. It sounds like that, because I think, people can be self-critical when they get a comment like that. Oh my goodness, I'm in the wrong lane. Maybe next time I ought to think about that, and I ought to stay in my own lane. How did I mess up? And what you're saying is you're being authentic to yourself.
I'm saying, if you don't value, that's one of my superpowers. I should have mentioned that, right? I'm a connector. I'm the mortar between the bricks, as you've heard me use that term before.
Yeah.
And to have somebody give me feedback that I can't do that, or that's not valuable to them, it's like, well, I'm in the wrong place. Then I need to go find somebody. And so the very next week, I was talking at a conference, and I was talking about this ability to go across the journey and connect the dots and use that same analogy. And I got off the stage. It was a keynote at Allegiance. I don't know when this was, 2012, I think. And I had a gal come up to me, and she said, "I loved what you had to say. I'd love to have more conversations." And I said, "I got plenty of time. I just quit my job." And she said, "Oh, can I hire you as a consultant?" And because she said, "I'm having trouble getting the silos working together, and I'd love to learn how you would approach that, and where you struggled before, but also how you did that with the teams you were able to influence." And I said, "Well, okay, I hadn't even thought about doing that, but all right, let's do it." And ended up, that's how I started Experience Catalyst. Did that for a little while, and then went to AT&T, and then the CXPA CEO. But I've always had the Experience Catalyst in the background. So that helped me to really say that message about the connectivity and working across the journey was important. I mean, it resonates with people.
So what I'm hearing is when you're being true to yourself, and not trying to conform to some other person's box, so to speak, then you'll find your tribe. Yes, you'll find somebody who wants to adopt that. It goes back to that change leadership I talked about at the beginning. I think organizations really underestimate the amount of change that it really takes to do this and do it well. It impacts every decision they make. It impacts how they work as teams. It impacts the competencies and capabilities the organization needs. So I think people, meaning organizations, are woefully unprepared for when they say they want to be customer centric. They really need to understand what that means, and you don't want to scare them. I went to a leadership when I was working with Invisalign, and we spent almost an entire day with the leadership team talking about what this was going to look and feel like as we went over a 2-year plan. There's going to be pushback. We're going to have a hard time getting people on board. We're going to, think about the scores, and that'll start to take over when really we need to be thinking about the human. And we just laid it out, and that was super helpful to help them know how it was going to feel and what they needed to do differently as leaders. So that type of preparing people for the amount of change that might be needed, or definitely would be needed, was important. Well, just so many great nuggets of wisdom from you today, Diane. I'm just so grateful that you joined us today on the show, and so grateful to have you here. What, if our listeners wanted to get a hold of you, what would be the best way?
LinkedIn. Go to LinkedIn, but if you're listening to a podcast, it's important to know that my last name is not spelled the way it sounds. It's Magers, Diane, Diane, LinkedIn. I'm there. I'm happy to connect with anybody and talk through, their challenges, their opportunities, and their, I call it floating in the pool moment, where they might be hearing things from their leadership and maybe need to take that step back and think about what they're doing and where they fit.
Love it. Floating in the pool moment. Well, thanks so much for being on the show, Diane.
Of course. My pleasure. Thanks, Mark.
Hey, thanks so much for listening to the Delighted Customers podcast. My special guest today was Diane Magers. Be sure to check out the show notes for any resources and links mentioned in the show. And you can find those on my website, empoweredcx.com. And if you're enjoying the podcast, would you share it and leave a review? It helps so much to get the word out. And remember, when we serve others well, we make a difference in the world.